The trophy that woke up a monster. Victor Wembanyama didn't need to say a word. The camera caught him sitting on the bench while Shai Gilgeous-Alexander lifted the MVP trophy in front of a roaring Oklahoma City crowd, and that single image told the whole story. SGA had the award, the Thunder had the home floor, the defending champions had the perfect script, but across the court sat a two-year-old giant staring at that trophy like he was memorizing the pain. Nobody around him moved much. Stephon Castle leaned in and said something quietly, but Wemby's eyes never really left the moment. This wasn't jealousy, this wasn't bitterness, this was fuel. The kind of fuel that doesn't explode right away, but burns deep enough to change an entire series. Before tip-off, Oklahoma City felt untouchable. They had swept through the postseason without a loss. Their fans were celebrating another MVP season for SGA. The building was loud, confident, almost certain that Game 1 would become another Thunder statement. But Wembanyama had not come to applaud someone else's coronation. He came to interrupt it. From the opening minutes, everything about him looked different. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't forcing drama, he was simply taking space away from everyone. Drives disappeared when he stepped near the paint. Shots became uncomfortable. Rebounds that looked open suddenly belonged to him. And every time Oklahoma City tried to turn the night back into SGA celebration, Wemby dragged it back into his own story. That is what makes this moment dangerous for the rest of the NBA. Wembanyama does not need to scream to make something personal. He does not need to pound his chest or talk like a villain. He watches, he remembers. Then he answers with points, rebounds, blocks, and silence. So before we go deeper, let me know where you're watching from. Comment your city or country below. And if you believe Wemby turned that MVP ceremony into motivation, press 1. If you think SGA still owns this rivalry, press 2. Don't forget to subscribe, because this story is only getting colder. The night Oklahoma City lost control. Game 1 was supposed to belong to Oklahoma City. The arena was still buzzing from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's MVP celebration. The Thunder were undefeated in the playoffs, and every sign pointed toward another clean, ruthless win from the defending champions. Then Victor Wembanyama changed the temperature of the room. He didn't just score, he controlled the entire shape of the game. When the Thunder attacked the rim, they saw his shadow before they saw the basket. When they missed, he swallowed the rebound. When San Antonio needed a bucket, he rose above defenders who looked helpless trying to reach him. By halftime, the message was already uncomfortable. SGA, the newly crowned MVP, could not find his rhythm. Wembanyama was everywhere, and Oklahoma City's perfect postseason suddenly looked fragile. The Spurs built a lead, lost it, survived chaos, and then walked straight into overtime. That was where most young teams break. But Wemby didn't break. After Chet Holmgren blocked his chance to win it in regulation, Wembanyama came back colder than before. With 28 seconds left in overtime, he pulled up from deep, far behind the arc, and drilled the kind of three that doesn't just tie a game. It steals oxygen from an entire arena. No wild celebration, no screaming, just a quiet walk back like he had expected it all along. Then came the final blows. Dunks, free throws, defensive stops, one possession after another. Wembanyama turned a Thunder celebration into a Spurs takeover. By the end, San Antonio had stolen Game 1, 122 to 115 in double overtime. And Wemby's numbers looked unreal. 41 points, 24 rebounds, and 49 minutes of dominance on both ends of the floor. This was not a lucky night. This was a warning. The Thunder had prepared for a superstar. They had not prepared for someone who could make the entire court feel smaller. One sentence changed everything. The game was over. The Thunder had been stunned. The basketball world was still trying to process what it had just witnessed. A two-year-old star had walked into the home arena of the defending champions, outplayed the reigning MVP, and delivered one of the greatest playoff performances of his young career. Then came the post-game interview. Most players would have celebrated. Some would have taken a victory lap. Others might have used the moment to send a message through the media. Victor Wembanyama did something far more powerful. He barely changed his expression. As reporters gathered around him, one question hung over the room. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Did watching Shai Gilgeous-Alexander receive the MVP trophy before the game make this performance personal? The room grew quiet. Wembanyama looked at the reporter and answered with just a few simple words. Yeah, for sure. That was it. No dramatic speech, no trash talk, no attempt to create headlines. Yet those 3 words instantly became the biggest headline of the night because everyone understood what they meant. Wembanyama had watched another player receive the award he wanted most. He had listened to an entire arena celebrate another man's achievement. Then he stepped onto the floor and produced a performance that felt like a direct response. What made it even more chilling was what came next. When asked about the MVP race, Wemby didn't complain about the voting. He didn't argue that he deserved the award. He He didn't attack SGA. Instead, he said he still had a lot to learn. Think about that for a second. A player who had just dropped 41 points and 24 rebounds against the defending champions was standing there talking about improvement. That mindset is exactly why so many people around the league believe he is different. Most stars chase validation. Wembanyama chases growth. Most players use disappointment as an excuse. Wembanyama used it as fuel, and suddenly, Game 1 wasn't just about a victory anymore. It became the first chapter of something much bigger. The conversation was no longer about whether Wemby could become the face of the NBA someday. The conversation became whether that day had already arrived. The promise hidden inside his word. The most dangerous part of Victor Wembanyama's post-game interview wasn't his admission that he took the MVP result personal. It was what he said after. While most of the basketball world focused on his "yeah, for sure" response, another statement quietly slipped through the conversation, and it may have revealed exactly where his mind is heading. When asked about seeing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hold the MVP trophy, Wembanyama didn't talk about disappointment. He didn't talk about frustration. He didn't talk about being overlooked. Instead, he looked forward. "I still have a lot to learn," he said, "and I want to win that trophy many times during my career." Many times, not once. Many. That wasn't confidence. That was a declaration. There's a huge difference between believing you can win an MVP and expecting multiple MVPs to become part of your career story. One, mindset hopes, the other plans, and that's what made his answer so powerful. Remember the circumstances. This wasn't a player speaking after an easy regular season win in January. This wasn't someone sitting comfortably after receiving an award. This was a young superstar standing in the middle of the biggest playoff run of his life after losing the MVP race by a significant margin. Most players would still be thinking about the result. Wembanyama was already thinking about the future. That's what separates elite competitors from everyone else. They don't spend much time staring at closed doors. They immediately start looking for the next one. The scary part for the rest of the NBA is that Wembanyama isn't talking about some distant dream. His actions are already backing up his words. He had just dominated the defending champions. He had just delivered one of the greatest playoff performances ever by a player his age. He had just turned the biggest individual disappointment of the season into the biggest statement game of his career. And suddenly, the MVP conversation felt different. Instead of asking whether Wembanyama would eventually win one, people started wondering how many he might collect before his career is over. Because for the first time, the league wasn't looking at a future superstar. It was looking at a future dynasty builder. And while the headlines focused on Game 1, another problem was quietly developing. The Thunder were about to hit back, and the response from Oklahoma City would push this rivalry to an entirely different level. When the Thunder finally punched back, for one night, it looked like Victor Wembanyama had stolen everything from Oklahoma City. He stole the energy from their MVP celebration. He stole home court advantage. He stole the clean playoff record the Thunder had protected through 2 rounds. And most importantly, he stole control of the story. But champions do not disappear after one punch. The Thunder came back with force. In Game 2, Oklahoma City adjusted. They crowded Wembanyama earlier, made every catch uncomfortable, pushed the pace, and forced the Spurs to work harder for every clean look. SGA, embarrassed by the way, Game 1 had turned into Wemby's night, responded with sharper attacks and better control. Suddenly, the series had a different rhythm. Wembanyama still produced, he still changed shots, he still made possessions feel impossible. But the Thunder were no longer shocked by his presence, they were prepared for it. That is when the Western Conference Finals became more than a highlight reel. It became a test. Game 3 only made the pressure heavier. Oklahoma City kept coming, kept adjusting, kept forcing San Antonio into mistakes. The Spurs were young, talented, and fearless, but they were also learning in real time how brutal playoff basketball becomes when an elite team targets every week. And after 3 games, San Antonio was down 2-1. That was the first real question for Wembanyama. Could he still lead when the momentum was gone? Could he still stay composed when the Thunder were no longer afraid? Could he carry a young Spurs team when every possession started to feel like a warning? This is where great players are separated from viral moments. One legendary night can make the world talk, but a playoff series demands something deeper. It demands patience, adjustment, endurance, leadership. And Wembanyama was about to learn that greatness is not only about dominating when everything is flowing, sometimes greatness is about standing in the middle of pressure, hearing the noise get louder, watching the opponent strike back, and still believing the series belongs to you. The response that defined a superstar. Every future legend reaches a moment when talent is no longer enough. For Victor Wembanyama, That moment arrived when the Spurs found themselves staring at a series that was beginning to slip away. Oklahoma City had adjusted. The crowd was louder, the pressure was heavier, and for the first time in the series, the Thunder looked like the experienced powerhouse everyone expected them to be. This was no longer about statistics, it was about leadership. The easiest thing for a young star to do in this situation is force the issue. Take difficult shots, hunt highlights, try to win the entire series in a single night. Wembanyama chose a different path. He trusted the process. Instead of chasing moments, he started controlling it. Every rebound became important. Every defensive rotation mattered. Every possession was treated like it could decide the season. That mindset exploded in Game 4. With San Antonio desperately needing a win, Wembanyama delivered exactly what the Spurs required. He attacked early, stayed aggressive, and refused to allow the Thunder to dictate the pace. The result was a masterclass. 33 points, big defensive stops, momentum-changing plays, and most importantly, a victory. The series was tied again. Just like that, the panic disappeared. But what impressed coaches and analysts wasn't the scoring. It was the maturity. The playoffs expose weaknesses. They reveal emotional cracks. They force players into situations where frustration can become their biggest enemy. Wembanyama never gave the Thunder that advantage. Whether he scored 40 points or struggled offensively, his body language stayed the same. Whether the Spurs were leading or trailing, his focus stayed the same. Whether the crowd was cheering or screaming against him, his approach stayed the same. That consistency began changing how people viewed him. Earlier in the season, many observers saw him as an incredible young talent. Now they were starting to see something else. A franchise cornerstone. A player capable of carrying expectations that would crush most stars. Because the deeper this series went, the more obvious it became that San Antonio's confidence came directly from one source. They believed that as long as Wembanyama was on the floor, they had a chance. And that belief was about to face its biggest challenge yet. The Thunder would strike back again. The series would swing once more. And soon, everything would come down to a winner-take-all Game 7. The night everything came down to one game. The Thunder weren't ready to surrender. Championship teams rarely are. After San Antonio evened the series, Oklahoma City answered once again, reminding everyone why they had spent most of the season looking like the most complete team in basketball. Every possession became more physical. Every mistake became more costly. Every game felt less like basketball and more like survival. The Thunder took another crucial victory, pushing the Spurs to the edge. Now, the situation was simple. Win or go home. For the first time during the entire playoff run, San Antonio was staring directly at elimination. The pressure was enormous. A young roster, a hostile environment, a defending champion waiting on the other side, and a two-year-old superstar carrying the expectations of an entire franchise. This is where careers can change forever. Some players spend years trying to prove they belong on the biggest stage. Others use the biggest stage to prove they were built for it. Wembanyama chose the second option. Facing elimination in Game 6, he played with a different level of urgency. Not desperation, not panic, urgency. The difference mattered. Desperate players rush. Urgent players focus. Every movement looked intentional. Every possession carried purpose. And when the final buzzer sounded, the Spurs were still alive. Wembanyama delivered another dominant performance, refusing to allow the season to end. The victory forced the one scenario basketball fans secretly hope for in every great series. Game 7. One game, 48 minutes, no excuses. No second chances. Everything both teams had worked for would be decided on a single night. The basketball world couldn't look away. On one side stood Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the reigning MVP, playing in front of his home crowd. On the other stood Victor Wembanyama, the young phenomenon who had spent the entire series turning doubt into motivation. The story almost felt scripted. The MVP, the challenger, the defending champions, the rising superstar. But Game 7 doesn't care about stories. It only cares about execution. As players walked off the court after Game 6, everyone knew what was coming. One final battle, one final test, and for Wembanyama, one final opportunity to prove that his incredible Game 1 performance wasn't just the beginning of a great series, it was the beginning of a new era. The coronation in enemy territory. Game 7 wasn't supposed to end this way. The crowd inside Oklahoma City's arena arrived expecting a celebration. The Thunder had home court. They had the reigning MVP. They had championship experience. Most importantly, they had an entire city convinced that the finals were only one win away. Victor Wembanyama had other plans. From the opening tip, the atmosphere felt different. Every possession carried tension. Every shot felt heavier. Every rebound sounded louder. You could feel the pressure hanging over the court. The Thunder came out aggressive, trying to establish control early. SGA attacked the paint. Oklahoma City's defense swarmed every touch. The building exploded whenever the home team made a run. But something unusual happened. The bigger the moment became, the calmer Wembanyama looked. There was no panic, no emotional reactions, no wasted energy, just complete focus. As the game moved into the second half, the Spurs began finding their rhythm. Wembanyama started controlling both ends of the floor. He wasn't simply scoring. He was dictating where everyone could go. A drive would suddenly disappear because he was waiting. A rebound would end up in his hands. A shot that looked open would become impossible. Little by little, the game started tilting towards San Antonio. Then came the final quarter. Championship pressure reveals the truth. Some players get smaller. Some players become legends. Wembanyama elevated his game exactly when the Spurs needed him most. Every big basket seemed to involve him. Every critical defensive stop seemed to involve him. Every important sequence seemed to begin with him. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City started feeling the weight of expectations. The crowd grew quieter, the Thunder became tighter, and San Antonio became stronger. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard delivered the verdict. The Spurs had done it on the road against the defending champions, against the reigning MVP, against one of the toughest environments in basketball. San Antonio was going to the NBA Finals, and standing at the center of it all was Victor Wembanyama. His series numbers were remarkable. His impact was undeniable. His leadership had carried a young team through one of the most difficult playoff battles imaginable. Moments later, he was named Western Conference Finals MVP. The same player who had watched someone else lift the MVP trophy just days earlier was now holding a trophy of his own. But the most powerful moment wasn't the award. It was what happened after. Because for the first time during this entire journey, the emotion he had kept hidden finally began to surface. The tears that divided the basketball world. When Victor Wembanyama finally reached the NBA Finals, he didn't celebrate like a player trying to look perfect for the camera. He broke. After the final buzzer in Oklahoma City, Wembanyama embraced his teammates, and the weight of the moment hit him all at once. The pressure, the expectations, the MVP disappointment, the brutal series, the road crowd, the years of dreaming about this stage, all of it came pouring out. For most fans, it was beautiful. They saw a young superstar who had carried himself with ice-cold discipline finally allowing himself to feel the moment. They saw proof that greatness is not emotionless. It is human, but not everyone agreed. Kevin Garnett questioned the reaction. To him, the job was not finished. The finals were still ahead. A champion, in his view, had to stay locked in, calm, and emotionally balanced until the last goal was complete. That criticism created a split. Some people believe Garnett was right. The finals are bigger than a conference title, but others defended Wembanyama immediately. They argued that emotion does not make a player weak. It shows how much the journey means. And Wemby's response made the moment even more powerful. He made it clear that he refused to carry the burden of hiding his emotions just to satisfy what others expected a superstar to look like. That answer revealed the full picture. The same player who calmly said, "Yeah, for sure," after taking the MVP race personally was also the player who could cry after reaching a lifelong dream. The cold competitor and the emotional human being were not opposites. They were both Victor Wembanyama. That is why this story connected so deeply. Because Wemby was not pretending to be a machine. He was showing that a player can be ruthless on the court and still honest off it. And maybe that is what makes him so dangerous. He does not hide his hunger. He does not hide his pain. He does not hide his joy. He carries all of it onto the floor, turns it into performance, and forces the entire NBA to deal with the result. Now, only one stage remained, the NBA Finals, and this time, the question was no longer whether Wembanyama was ready for greatness. The question was whether the league was ready for him. The message to the entire NBA, the most important thing Victor Wembanyama accomplished during this playoff run wasn't reaching the NBA Finals. It wasn't the 4-1 point explosion. It wasn't the 24 rebound. It wasn't even defeating the reigning MVP and the defending champions on their own floor. The most important thing he accomplished was changing the conversation. Before this postseason, people talked about Wembanyama as the future face of the league, the future MVP, the future champion, future, future, after this playoff run, that language started disappearing. Because the future arrived faster than anyone expected, think about everything that happened. He watched another player lift the MVP trophy he desperately wanted. He turned that disappointment into motivation. He delivered one of the most memorable performances of his career. He survived a brutal 7-game battle against one of the NBA's strongest teams. He led a young roster through adversity. He earned a trip to the NBA final. And he did it all at just 22 years old. That's what makes this story bigger than basketball. Every person faces moments when someone else receives the promotion, recognition, opportunity, or reward they wanted. Most people become bitter. Some people make excuses. The rare few use those moments as fuel. Wembanyama chose the third option. Instead of complaining about the MVP vote, he improved. Instead of attacking critics, he responded through performance. Instead of hiding his emotions, he embraced them. That combination is power. Confidence without arrogance. Emotion without weakness. Ambition without excuses. Those qualities create leader. And whether the Spurs ultimately win a championship or not, this playoff run revealed something important. Victor Wembanyama is no longer chasing legitimacy. He has already earned it. The rest of the league now understands what San Antonio has known for a long time. A new era is coming. An era built around a player who remembers every disappointment, studies every failure, respects every opponent, and keeps moving forward no matter what stands in his way. That is why the MVP story mattered. That is why Game 1 mattered. That is why those tiers matter. Every moment became part of a larger transformation. From prospect to superstar, from superstar to leader, from leader to potential legend. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Victor Wembanyama will win multiple MVP awards during his career? Press 1 if you believe he will become the face of the NBA. Press 2 if you think another superstar will stop him. And tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so you never miss the biggest NBA stories, breaking news, playoff drama, and superstar rivalries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.